Alright, Shalom. Before I start off, I'd like to give all honor, glory, and praise unto our Heavenly Father and His only God, Son, Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. The true name of the Heavenly Father in the ancient Paleo Hebrew tongue is Yahweh. Yah meaning He, Hawa to be, to exist. Ba Hashem in the name of His only begotten Son, our Lord and Savior, Yahweh Shai, Hamashiach, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, Yeshua, and amongst other names. But the true name is Yahweh Shai. Alright, Yah meaning He, Hawaii, deliverer or savior. Double honors to my apostles and elders of Great Millstone, taught me this truth. And peace and blessings to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel, which consists of you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native and Seminole Indians, West Indians, and Haitians, as well as you Israelite foreigners scattered abroad. Alright? And real quick, I was inspired by it was an after camp lesson. The brothers over there in NY, okay, the elder apostles, we're going into Daniel, the 8th chapter. All right, now I kind of briefly, went into it. I just recently got into Daniel 7, which is dealing with, history, right, but also prophecy. The four major empires that will come into rule, right, before the kingdom of heaven would be established. Okay, and we're in the last days, man. The last rulership, so to speak, of the heathen. Okay. And within the 8th chapter, Daniel the 8th chapter, and I'm gonna go through the whole thing, okay? And I'm gonna try to do this fast, but basically this is dealing with the Medo-Persian Empire and the Greek Empire. Alright? Because before you would have the Greek Empire coming into power, you had the Medo-Persian Empire, right? So from the top, it says Daniel 8:1. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, which King Belshazzar was one of the last rulers, right? During the end of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, okay? Which you read in Daniel the 5th chapter, it goes into how they had thrown a feast, right, and you had the writing on the wall, which basically represented the end of the Neo-Babylonian Empire was come, okay, right? And Belshazzar was one of the last kings of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, right? He was a descendant of Nebuchadnezzar the second, okay. But it says, in the 3rd year of the reign of Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in the vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was in Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And you could look that up, on the ancient map, equated to these newer maps, which a lot of the lands, which were being called by these different names, have changed, but you can get a gist of where all these things was going down, okay? Which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there's still before the ram, there's still before a river, a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but the one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. Which that ram represents the Medo-Persian Empire, all right? Because you had the Medes, right, that came in the power first, which was, the Medes and the Persians represent those 2 horns. The Persians came up last, right? Because, the first, like I said, was the Medes, right, which took down the Babylonians, okay? So the Medes came up first, and the Persians came up last through Cyrus and Darius, right? And this ram, you can equate that to Daniel the 7th chapter, where it talks about the bear, right? And it goes on to, it talks about how the bear had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it, right? Roughly paraphrases, but that represented Lydia, Egypt, and Babylon, okay? I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, and notice it doesn't say from the east because they came from the east, right? So that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but did according to his will and became great. Because the Medo-Persian Empire was powerful, man. All right, and this is all through the power of Yahweh B'Shem Al-Shai. Okay, the Lord set these nations up to rule. And the Medo-Persian Empire, they were fierce. They had conquered Babylon, Syria, Asia, parts of Greece, Egypt, Ethiopia, Lydia, right? And this is the same empire that the Israelites, Cyrus came with the decree, which granted us, permission to rebuild the temple, right? And let's see if I can get this real quick. Daniel 4:17, the point I hit earlier. This matters by the decree of the watchers and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over the basis of men. And right now, the basis of men is Esau, Edom. That's who's ruling right now. All right. Esau, Edom, the Edomites, man. All right, the so-called white man. Okay. The Most High set these kingdoms up, but he's getting ready to throw them down. All right. I mean, he's getting ready to throw down his last empire, right? Which after that, Esau is the end of the world and Jacob is the beginning of it to follow it. The nation of Israel is going to come into power. That's going to be an eternal rule. Eternal rule, all right? Once the Lord Yahweh Shai comes back to subdue the nations, man, and ultimately the chief of the nations right now, Esau, Edom. Okay? So it says, hold on, let me go back. Daniel 7, it's like 8 and 5. And I was considering, behold, and he-goat came from the west of the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And that he-goat represents Alexander the Great in the Greek Empire. All right? And it talks about, and touch not the ground, right? Talking about the swiftness of them, okay? Because when you read Daniel 7, the previous chapter, the 6th verse, it says, after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which is talking about the Greek Empire also, all right? But, a leopard is swift, all right? Which Alexander the Great, okay, that king over the Greek Empire, right? The Greek Empire, because remember, his father, Philip II, had a plan to assemble those Greek city-states at his time to invade the Persian Empire, but it wouldn't happen because he got assassinated, right? His son came into power, Alexander the Great, quote unquote, all right? And he led it, okay? But this Alexander conquered most of the known world within 6 to 8 years of his reign, okay? Which he reigned 12 years and died. That history is in the first book of Maccabees, the first chapter, all right? This is actual history. This is actual history that lines up with the secular history, right? Which shows you that the scriptures is real, okay? Because we're still in biblical times, prior to contrary to popular belief, all right? We're in the times of the end, okay? It says, verse 6, and he came to the ram that had 2 horns. Oh, wait, hold on. It says the goat had a notable horn between his eyes, which is talking about Alexander the Great. All right. 6, and he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. Because you had the Greeks that came against the Persians, right? There was a series of battles which you had, I forget the other one, Salakia, but you had the Battle of Gargamela and the Battle of Essos, right? Which First Maccabees, the first chapter, talks about how, the Greek Empire had smitten the Persians, all right? Salakia, I ain't got, my services, I don't have data, so I'll just read this off screen. Bear with me a second. This is First Maccabees, the first chapter, starting at the first verse. It says, and it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Shittim, had smitten Darius, the king of the Persians and the Medes, and reigned in his stead, the first over Greece. All right, so that was Alexander the Greek and the Greek Empire coming into power, right? It says, Daniel 8:7, and I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him and smote him. So like smote the ram and break his two horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him to the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver out of his hand. So it says he was moved with choler against him, which choler basically means anger, bitterness, right? Because there was a spirit on Alexander to take them down, okay? Which, you had Darius III, right, who was taken down during the Battle of Gargamela, I believe, all right? Well, basically, they were sending letters between each other. Darius pretty much, wanting to make truce between Alexander and the Greeks, and I think he wanted to, make certain pledges, right? But Alexander wasn't having it, okay? So eventually, come the Battle of Essos, or the Battle of Gargamela, the Greeks actually prevailed over the Medes and the Medo-Persian Empire, the Persians, all right? Which you get into that history, the Battle of Essos, the Battle of Gargamela, those are decisive battles that happened between the Greeks and the Medo-Persian Empire. Within that history, you had Darius, pretty much a man, I think a man named Bessus, or Bessos, right, killed Darius III, pretty much to buy them time to escape, But none of their allies really, the Persians, could help them from Alexander, right? Because this was the will of the Lord to bring the Greeks into rule, all right? So it says, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down onto the ground and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, because Alexander the Great died after 12 years of his reign, right? And for it came up 4 notable ones to the 4 winds of heaven, talking about his 4 generals, Lysimachus, Cassander, Ptolemaeus, and Seleucus, coming into power and parting his kingdom after he had died, right? And this Alexander died, but some say it was malaria, some say it was syphilis, but we know according to the scriptures that he fell ill and died, all right? As it says, First Maccabees, I'm continuing, off screen. First Maccabees 1 and 2. And made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth, and went through the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him. Whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up. And he gathered a mighty strong host, and ruled over countries and nations and kings, and became tributaries unto him. Slacky is bug out, man. Playing music in the background. It says, wherefore his servants, such as were honorable, and had been brought up with him from his youth, parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. All right. It says, so Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule, everyone in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, and so did their sons after them many years. and evils were multiplied in the earth because he had the wicked, all right, the Edomites, man, coming into power, right? So going back, it says the great horn was broken, which is talking about when Alexander died. And for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven, which represent those four generals that came in power after him. All right. It says, and out of one of them came out a little horn, came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, toward the east, toward the pleasant land. Right? Which is talking about out of that Seleucid line, the Seleucid Empire, right? Which you had Seleucus the First, Nicator, and out of him came Antiochus, right? You had Antiochus the Third. Eventually, you would have Antiochus the Fourth, Epiphanes. All right, which you know, you read in the first Maccabees, you know, that whole history is there. You know. So that little horn represents Antiochus the Fourth Epiphanes, right? And it says, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, which you know, the south pretty much like Egypt, Syria, you know. And the scriptures talk about how these generals, right, and their sons warred against each other many years, right? Or I believe that was going into the Josephus, which is Josephus. He recorded a lot of that history as well. All right. And he actually warred against Ptolemy. Right? He had wars between the Ptolemaic dynasty and the Seleucid Empire. Right? And he you know, he besieged Alexandria, Egypt, which he had Israelites there. Right? You had Jake there that was scattered there by Ptolemy. By the Ptolemies, right? And I believe either it had to be Antiochus, I believe the third, the father of Antiochus the Fourth. You know, he was trying to campaign against Alexandria, but Rome pretty much prevented him, right? And stopped his campaign. Okay? Which you know, talks about how Antiochus the Fourth was hostage in Rome, which came about, which was like the aftermath of that whole situation, you know, where you know, Antiochus the Third, you know, had struck a deal, and pretty much he would give up certain things, right, and prisoners, right, and those prisoners would be changed out, but his son would remain. So that's where you had in the Maccabees, it talks about how this Antiochus Epiphanes had been hostage at Rome. All right. But going on, it says toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. Right? Which the pleasant land is talking about the pleasant land is talking about Jerusalem, right, where the Jews were. Okay. Verse 10, it says, and it waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Right? Which the stars represent the Israelites and the priesthood. Okay? Which when you get into the first book, first Maccabees, right? It goes into that history of how Antiochus Epiphanes dealt with our people. Right? Which he came in and defiled our sanctuary. All right? Yeah, the abomination was make it desolate. Okay? Slakia, verse. You know, a lot of our people, we were being killed pretty much for keeping our customs. All right? which is going into the whole Hellenization period. All right. Which, he came in with this deception, right? Wickedness, and persecution. He sacked the temple, all right? And took the daily sacrifice away, which you're going to get into, as you proceed, all right? A lot of that was going down. A lot of what was going down during our great Greek captivity was Hellenization, all right? And that's a big part of how we became uncircumcised and Gentiles, as you read of in the New Testament, right? Because we were forced to keep those customs of the Greeks, which were averse to our customs, all right? Let me see. But you had a remnant. You had a few that had resisted Hellenization, right? During the Maccabean revolt. You had Mattathias, Judas Maccabees, and those that were joined unto them. It's pretty much weren't going to get down, all right? But you would have, that's why, you had those of the circumcision, right? When the Lord was on the scene, there were offspring of those that had resisted, and kept the customs, right? But all this history is in the first Maccabees, We say they try to remove from the scriptures, right? The Apocrypha, right? It says, verse 10, and waxed great, even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the hosts and of the stars to the ground and stamped upon them, right? Which again, we were being killed for keeping our customs, right? And you had certain men selling out to live and to make pacts with the heathen, all right? But others that resisted, like the Maccabees and those that have joined unto them, So let me see. This is first Maccabees 1:10, and it came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, but since we've departed from them, we have had much sorrow. Pretty much, since we departed from them, we've been catching hell. So they actually wanted to get down with the heathen, It says, so this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward therein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. And they made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief. Also, like verse 14, it says, whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, right? Let me see. There's a certain point I want to get. It's at the latter end of this chapter. So I'll get the point right here. It's first Maccabees. First Maccabees, first chapter, verse 20. It says, and after that Antiochus had smitten Egypt, he returned again in the 143rd year and went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude, and entered proudly into the sanctuary, and took away the golden altar and the candlesticks of light and the vessels thereof, and the table of showbread and the pouring vessels and the vials and the censers of gold and the veil and the crowns and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all of which he had pulled off. And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre and spoken very proudly. And this is the so-called white man. All right. This is the so-called white man that's in power today. All right. As the Greeks, that was the beginning of the beast system. right? And the Romans, okay, which are back today. You know? But let me see. That's where you have Daniel, the 8th chapter, verse 10, verse 11. Yet he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. It says he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, which the prince of the host represents the high priest. All right, which Onias, at a certain point, it was Onias, right, who was the high priest, but he was put to death, okay? And his brother Jason was set up, who was a sellout, all right? So the daily sacrifice was taken away, and we had a morning and an evening sacrifice. Let me just see if I could get certain points in this chapter. Back in the Maccabees, 1 second. First Maccabees, first chapter, verse. I'm start at 44 or 41. It's like 39. Now, you know what? I'll just start at verse 30. You know, pretty much the whole chapter. You got to read the whole chapter, you know. It says, First Maccabees 1 and 30, and spake peaceable words unto them, but all was deceit. For when they had given him credence, he fell suddenly upon the city and smote it very sore, and destroyed much people of Israel. Right? And when he had taken the spoils of the city, he had set it on fire, and pulled down the houses and walls thereof on every side. But the women and children took they captive, and possessed the cattle. Then they builded the city of David with a great and strong wall, and with mighty towers, and made it a stronghold for them. And when they put therein a sinful nation, wicked men, and fortified themselves therein, they stored it also with armor and victuals. And when they had gathered together the spoils of Jerusalem, they laid them up there. And so they became a sore snare, for it was a place to lie in wait against the sanctuary, an evil adversary to Israel, and an evil adversary to Israel. Thus they shed innocent blood on every side of the sanctuary and defiled it, insomuch that the inhabitants of Jerusalem fled because of them. Whereupon the city was made a habitation of strangers, and became strange to those that were born in it, and her own children left her. Her sanctuary was laid waste like a wilderness. Her feasts were turned in the morning, her Sabbaths into reproach, and her honor into contempt. As had been her glory, so was her dishonor increased, and her excellency turned in the morning. Right? Because like we read, and it cast some of the hosts and the stars to the ground and stamped upon them. All right? But they was coming in, you know, Antiochus and the Greeks was coming in and laying waste to our sanctuary, man, defiling our temple. All right? Setting up idols. All right? Having to sacrifice abomination upon the altar of the Lord. Right? Which they knew. They knew that the high priest in the temple was our connection to Yahweh. All right? No, they knew that the sacrifice was our connection to the Most High. So they had us sacrifice abominations, right? Like swine, right? Which niggas is still treating swine like it's a fucking commodity, right? Niggas is still treating swine like it's a commodity, but it's abomination, all right? And they did the same thing when they came over here. They made you niggas eat chitlins, you know? It says, verse 11, the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. All right here. The history is all right here, right? And they try to hide, like I said, they try to hide this history. You know, the average J doesn't know about this history. You know? They even forgot what happened when these devils even came over here, right? They try to throw it behind them. Oh, that's just the past. Like, this motherfucker hasn't changed. And shit like that. You see, another 70 AD, another event like this is getting ready to take place all over again. All right? You know, where if you don't want to get down with the NWO, the system that they're coming with, you know, they gonna put people to death. All right? They gonna come with the consequences, right? With all the wickedness that they're setting up, you know, pretty much seeking to cut us off from our power. You know, but the Lord has left a remnant, you know, which is likened unto a spiritual temple, which isn't going to be cut off. Right? It says, verse 12, and the host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Right? Because he had a lot of our people selling out for fear. All right? Pretty much, you know, they helped them to push this wickedness, right? Which it talks about, let me see, First Maccabees right here, First Maccabees, first chapter, at the 51st verse. In the self-same manner wrote he to the whole kingdom and appointed overseers over all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city. Let's talk about how, you know, earlier, verse 46, and pollute the sanctuary and holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh. It's like swine's flesh and unclean beasts, right? Because they had profaned the altar of the Lord, right? The sanctuary, man, by doing all this, setting up all this wickedness, all right? It says, well, I'll read that over. I'll start at verse 50. And whosoever will not do according to the commandment of the king, he said he should die. All right. In the self-same manner, he wrote to his whole kingdom and appointed overseers over all the people, commanding the cities of Judah to sacrifice city by city. Then many of the people were gathered unto them, to wit, everyone that forsook the law, and so they committed evils in the land. Right. Because, again, you had certain people that was selling out and helping to forward that wickedness, right? This was all, you know, this is all set up by the Most High, you know? This is all ordained by Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai, you know? Prophecy, you know? But this is history, you know? But the Most High set up, like it says, the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men. You know? Verse 13. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and transgression and desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? It says verse 14. And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. Right? And that 2,300 days represents roughly 6 years and 3 months. How long that wickedness will be going on, you know, taking place and going on before Judas Maccabeus, right? And those that resisted would clean the sanctuary, right? Which you read of in First Maccabees, the 4th chapter, around the 52nd verse, right? I'm gonna get it. Cause like all that was going on, you know, you had people that was selling out to get down with Esau's program. You had certain that resisted, certain that wasn't gonna get down. All right, just like in this time, you're gonna have the elect ultimately that aren't gonna get down with this system, even unto death. All right. So this is First Maccabees 4 in verse 52. It says, now on the 5th, it's like now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month of Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law, which upon the new altar of burnt offerings, which they had made. All right. Let me see if I can read up. Because it talks about how they had cleansed the temple of all that shit that they had put in there. It says, verse 38, and when they saw the sanctuary desolate and the altar profane, and the gates burned up, and the shrubs growing in the courts as in the forest, or one of the mountains, and the priest's chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes and made a great lamentation and cast ashes upon their heads. Because you got to imagine, man, like, that was a very troubling time for us. All right. Look at all they had done to our people. You know, they had slain certain of our women for circumcising their children. Right. They slew a lot of our people, man. Right. They defiled our temple. You know, they laid our sanctuary waste. They put up all these abominations. They had us sacrifice abominations upon the altar of the Most High. Right? And try to force us not to call ourselves Jews. Right? Verse 40, and they fell down flat to the ground upon their faces and blew the alarm with trumpets and cried toward heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleansed the sanctuary and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profaned, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it. Wherefore they pulled it down, and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show what should be done unto them, or done with them, right? Then they took the stones according to the law, and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple, and hollowed the courts. And they made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick, and the altar of burnt offerings and incense, and of incense, and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light to the temple. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table, and spread out the veils, and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 5th and 20th day of the 9th month, which is called the month of Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning, and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar, the burnt offerings which they had made. So it says, look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the Most High of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days, and offered burnt sacrifice offerings with gladness, and sacrifice of deliverance and praise, right? Which is why we celebrate the high holy day of the Feast of Dedication, Kanak, right? Or Hanukkah, okay? You know, so where it says, I'm going to read that again. Verse 13, then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint who spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, and the transgression and desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot, the abomination that make it desolate, right? And he said unto me, until 2,300 days. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. So that was the time. That was, when the temple was cleansed. After 6 years and 3 months from when it started, right, to when it ended. First Maccabees, the first chapter, around the 54th verse. To First Maccabees, the 4th chapter, around the 52nd verse. All right. It says, verse 15, and it came to pass, when I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And I heard the man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid, and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in deep sleep, on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed the end shall be. The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia, right? The ram that you read in the verse above, right? Which talked about the 2 horns being the Medes, right? And that horn that was higher than the other representing the Persians, right? Because the Persians had the greater portion of the kingdom, all right? Verse 21, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia. The king of Grecia is Alexander the Great. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king, also Alexander the Great, all right? Now that being broken, Alexander the Great died, right? Like I told you in First Maccabees, the 1st chapter, right? So Alexander reigned 12 years and died, okay? Whereas 4 stood up for it. 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power, right? Because those 4 generals will go on to part his kingdom. Which again, that was Lysimachus, Ptolemaeus, Cassander, and Seleucus, right? And there's a lot of history between the Seleucid Empire and the Ptolemaic dynasty and how they dealt with our people. You got to read the book of Maccabees, man. And also the works of Flavius Josephus, all right? Which Josephus was an Israelite, okay? And he recorded a lot of our history, even concerning Alexander the Great and these generals that came up after him, right? And part of his kingdom, like I said. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to a full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall come up, and his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, which shall be broken without hand. Which I was talking about Antiochus IV Epiphanes, right? And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up and did the king's business. And I stood astonished at the vision, but none understood it. Right? Because like it tells you, and like I heard the elder apostles say, we know more than the prophets back then. Because like it tells you in Habakkuk, the 2nd chapter, the vision is yet for the appointed time, but at the end it shall speak. Right? And we have the full spectrum, man. All right? We have the understanding in these times to be able to break them down plainly. All right? So with that, I'm going to end it off here. Hopefully this has been edifying. This is Daniel, the 8th chapter. Giving all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashim Al-Shai, Ba'ashim Kakudash. Double honors to my apostles, the elders, Great Millstone, who rule well and who taught me this truth. And peace and blessings to the hopeful elect. To the next one, I say Shalom.